Hi, everyone. Welcome to our daily power hour. We are now in week 30, and today is our 181st Native Wellness Power Hour. So I'd like to welcome you. My name is Jolene Joseph. I am the Executive Director of the Native Wellness Institute. And today I am also filling in for our guests that were supposed to be on today. There was some technical difficulties because they were coming all the way from New Zealand. So I hurried up and combed my hair and changed my shirt. And here I am. And I have a couple colleagues that are going to be joining me in a minute. And we're going to talk about Indigenous Peoples Day and some of our reflections from yesterday. So
of the Native Wellness Institute.
Sorry about that. So just a little bit of background about the Native Wellness Institute. So we are a national nonprofit organization. We like to say that we're a social profit because the work that we do benefits society. And we exist because of the lasting impacts of historical and intergenerational trauma. And more importantly, we exist to help people connect the dots between trauma and lasting behaviors, and then provide the tools and opportunities for healing so our people can move forward and embrace life in a good way, just the way we were born and intended to be. So our organization right now is celebrating our 20th anniversary. So here in the middle of this pandemic and everything else that's happening in our world, we're celebrating our 20th anniversary. We're super proud of that. Many of our founders have been doing this work for many, many years. Myself, I'm 54, and I have been doing this kind of work in Indian country since I was 19. So for many, many years. And many of my mentors also helped to found this organization. And we're just super proud of all of the work that we do and the people that we serve and the healing that has happened. And so that's like the bigger picture, is that change is happening. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. And so when the pandemic hit back, when it really hit, like back in March, and the country started shutting down, we were actually doing a training. We had a training over in Florida. And as soon as we got to Florida on March 9th, like the country started shutting down, and we're just like, oh my goodness. And so we were, doing our social distancing and, not shaking hands and all that kind of stuff during the training. And then we got home and we had a staff meeting on Friday the 13th, March 13th. And then we had a board meeting that following Monday. And then by that Saturday, March 21st, we started our Native Wellness Power Hours. And so we started going 7 days a week because we knew that an already traumatized people would be re-traumatized by this pandemic. And so we wanted to offer our part because we're solution oriented. We wanted to offer our contribution to the pandemic by offering, daily programming to kind of be an anchor for people, and a place where people could come at the same time, the same place every day to receive some uplifting messaging and positive programming and things like that. So we've never been in a pandemic before, so we didn't know how long we would be doing this. We were thinking, I think, a couple of months or something. But here we are months and months later. Like I said, we're in week 30. Our 181st Power Hour is today. So thank you again for tuning in. All of our Power Hours are kept on our Facebook page, and then we also save them to our YouTube channel. So if you're bored and you're looking for shows to watch, you can go to our YouTube channel and kind of like binge watch all of the Power Hours. So they're intended for your enjoyment, but they're also intended for your healing journey and your wellness journey as well. So we're super grateful for that. And so we created these shirts from our Power Hours, and I'm wearing the shirt today that says, healing people, heal people. And we have a bunch of other shirts: Shift Happens, Grandma Up, Healing is a verb, different shirts like that, and they're available on our website. And the proceeds from those sales like help us to do the power hours. So I just wanted to put in a plug from our shirts. And so I'm trying to look at the comments here. Is it possible that some Indians do not experience historical trauma? Our good friend Becky Black, nope, it's in our DNA. We may not recognize it for what it is, but it's there. So yeah, all of us as Indigenous people, there might be a few tribes left in South America, but most Indigenous people around the globe have experienced colonization. And so colonization is, sorry, I'm trying to like read the comments and talk. Colonization, you know, was based on white supremacy, and it was the taking of our lands and our way of life. Here in the US, the experience includes things like genocide and massacres and boarding school, disease, biological warfare, chemical warfare through the introduction of alcohol, all of those kinds of things, forced religion, loss of life, loss of way of life, all those kinds of things are examples of historical trauma. So all of us as descendants here on this earth today, we are the descendants of the miracle survivors of genocide, right? And so 100% of us then have been impacted by the historical and intergenerational trauma. When the trauma changes our behaviors, and those behaviors still play out today, whether it's like cycles of poverty, whether it's cycles of abuse, whether it's cycles of violence or other addictions, whether it's cycles of our people being in the foster care system or other systems like prison and jail, and those keep being passed down from generation to generation, those are examples of intergenerational trauma. So when the healing doesn't happen, the trauma continues. And so for those of us that have been doing this work for many decades, like we clearly see those cycles play out in our families and in our communities, like we see it clearly. So one of the things that our organization does then is to help our people understand that, and to help our people connect the dots between trauma and the behavior, so we know what it is that we have to heal from. And so when we hear things like, just get over it, we have a better understanding of what that is. So like even when we break down and dissect that sentence, just get over it, like what's the it? What's the it that we need to get over? So the it, from the perspective that we come from, the it is the lasting behaviors, right? The lasting unhealthy behaviors that we see play out. And interestingly, a couple weeks ago, I think it was now, I did a power hour on lateral oppression, and some people call it lateral violence. And I wanted to do a part 2. And so I guess today will kind of be my part 2 until my colleagues join me. They're like, one's getting a COVID test, and you know, people were busy, and I was texting them, wait, we gotta go on. Anyway, lateral oppression is one of the lasting impacts from colonization. And the lasting impacts of colonization really are called colonialism. So colonialism is another ism that continues to play out, just like racism, sexism, classism, ageism, ableism, and all the other isms that are out there, right? So colonization was about racism and oppression. And oppression is about, you know, I always view oppression like this big thumb, right? Like holding somebody down or holding a people down. That's what oppression is. When our voice is taken away, our power is taken away, and all of that happened through colonization, right? Being forced onto reservations or rancherias, or you know, being forced and then watched by the military, so we would not leave, or so we wouldn't practice our culture or anything like that. That's those are examples of oppression, right? Holding a people down. And what social science has taught us is that, hey, Jean, welcome.
Hey.
I'm just covering some stuff about oppression real quick, and then I want to jump into like our reflections from Indigenous Peoples Day.
Okay.
So thanks for jumping on. So when a people have been oppressed for so long, we learn that very well. And we learn that and believe that in our heads, and we learn that and believe that in our hearts. That's called internalizing it. So internalized oppression, or even internalized racism. So then what happens is when we see people that look like us or live like us, we oppress them because we believe that they are less than as well. And that's called lateral oppression or lateral violence. And it's something that plays out in our families and our communities. It played out yesterday on Indigenous Peoples Day. It plays out like all the time. And it plays out where we say or think or write things like, well, Jean, who do you think you are telling traditional stories online? Do you think you're better than us? Of course, I would never say that, but like these are examples of lateral oppression, right? Or somebody goes off to treatment and they come back and we say things like, oh, who do you think you are? You know, are you trying to be better than us? Here's a drink. Let's celebrate. Here's a drink of whiskey. Let's celebrate that you just came back from treatment. That's an example of lateral oppression, right? Or when somebody wants to make change in their community by picking up trash, right? Oh, who do you think you are? Are you trying to be white and make us white? So like those are examples of lateral oppression. Anytime we say something like, who do you think you are? Like that's probably lateral oppression coming out, right? Who do you think you are trying to stand up and get people to vote? Who do you think you are trying to make us do the census? You know, don't you know that system wasn't made for us? You know, F that system. You know, those are all examples of lateral oppression. And so what happens is we are continuing the work of our colonizers. When we oppress each other laterally, we are continuing the work of the colonizers, and that's how colonialism continues to play out. And sometimes we don't have that awareness that we are like actively engaged in that. So that's in part why our organization exists, is to help to bring this awareness and to help our people connect the dots so that we can like unconnect those dots in some places and really do some reflection to work on our own selves. So anyway, I was just kind of following up, Jean, from the previous Power Hour I did on oppression, and it created a lot of, you know, conversation.
A lot of questions and stuff. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I really enjoyed that conversation and that thing on lateral oppression that you did, you know, and just, you know, and although I've been in this work for, I don't know how long, and for a long time now, I'm starting to be one of those old guys that have been doing this, you know, and, you know, but that's okay. There's always something to learn. And so just listening to your conversation on that, just that learning that I had, you know, and just, you know, I really like that part that, you know, when you say doing the work of the oppressors, doing the work of the colonizers, you know, and that, you know, because sometimes, you know, okay, I've been in this work for a while now. Yeah. And I find myself getting caught in that, you know, just old habits or blind spots. I still have blind spots that I myself need to learn and take a look at. And it really helps that my wife, Ruby, is there and she keeps me accountable, you know? And so it's like that accountability partner, somebody who I trust, plus she feels free to be able to tell me. And, you know, it's okay. It's okay to point these things out, you know, and those things as well. So.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. So there was a comment, somebody says, let's see, where did it go? Something about what if our people won against, what if your people fought and won against colonial expansion, you know? And I say, awesome, like more power to you. what happens though is because of our collective experience, right? And because of racism, especially in this country, we're still impacted by it, right? At the systems level, So so Jean, and if people are just tuning in, please share the live stream so other people can jump on and join us. We're today, this week, we're celebrating Indigenous Peoples Week, really. And today we were having our good friends and colleagues from New Zealand, our Maori brothers and sisters, come on. They had technical difficulties and weren't able to join us today. So I jumped on at the last minute. I texted Jean and some of our other team members. So we're all just kind of jumping on the last minute. But we just wanted to have a conversation today, well, about all kinds of things. But one, some of our reflections from yesterday. So yesterday was the official Indigenous Peoples Day, which we know many people have taken healthy risks to change the former holiday to Indigenous Peoples Day. It's still Columbus Day is still a federal holiday here in the United States, but many tribal nations and urban cities are changing it. Many organizations are changing it to Indigenous Peoples Day. So Jean, would you like to just share, what was your day like yesterday, Indigenous Peoples Day?
You know what? My day yesterday was well, I had a busy day, and so I was actually excited with the going into the day, just because I knew I was going to be on, I was going to be online, I was going to be sharing with people, and so actually I started off the day actually in a meeting with a group of men in a men's group, and we're discussing about men's wellness and men's health, and then we got into Indigenous Peoples Day and just about that celebration of it and that pride of it, and at the same time, it's almost there. I'm going to be honest. There's part of me. There's like a sadness part of it too, because I was thinking about my ancestors and the oppression that they went through, and the hardships and everything they went through. For me to be here, that was a good thing. But what they didn't have that experience of having being able to this day that to celebrate their heritage, their culture, their indigenous, selves. But I'm here to be able to celebrate and be thankful for that for them.
Yeah.
And so it was so thinking about that throughout the day and throughout the whole evening, and but at the same time, Julian, I'm always thinking about that Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yeah.
It's sure we have this day, but I'm always celebrating that Indigenous Peoples Day all the time, and and my indigenousness and re-indigenizing ourselves and doing that. So to have a specific day was kind of cool, and to bring people in who just might be kind of like reluctant or just exploring that about themselves.
Yeah.
Just to lift them up, but so it was as many mixed emotions in that whole yesterday about it, especially as I get older, I start to reflect more and more about this, because to be honest with you, if I was younger, it would have meaning, but not to the depth of meaning that it has for me now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a depth that I can't even explain.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thanks, Jean. Well, welcome, Theta, and thank you for jumping on at the last minute. I was just explaining to our audience here that our colleagues from New Zealand had technical difficulties, and like a couple minutes to noon, they were like, hey, we're not gonna be able to get on. So I texted you guys, said, hey, do you want to join me? So thanks for jumping on. And I started out, before Jean jumped on, just kind of reviewing a little bit from the other day when I was talking about lateral oppression, because it really like sparked, I got a lot of messages regarding that one. And then now we're just kind of sharing our reflections from yesterday, because it was Indigenous Peoples Day. And so I was just asking Gene some of his reflections. So now I'll ask you the same, like, what are some of your reflections from yesterday, Indigenous Peoples Day?
Wow. Well, first of all, thank everyone for making the change in the last 5 years. Everyone called it Indigenous Day. I never even heard the C word all day. And like 5 years ago, I was reflecting, 10 years ago, we heard that C word all the time, that, he discovered our continent. So I was just reflecting like 10 years ago. And since our kia ora to our Maori, if there's Maori on,
Kia ora, kia ora. Yeah,
I want to let me reflect on some of the Maori history that NWI has experienced in the past 10 years. And because they also are healing from the internalized oppression, is when you are hurt by the oppressors over and over. If your grandparents were hurt like boarding school, if your parents were hurt like because of the color of their skin, systematic racism, and then that lateral oppression happens when you're hurt and your wound is bleeding and raw. And so you just you hurt people. So in 2004 was the first time I went to Aotearoa, which is New Zealand. And Aotearoa means, and it's kind of beautiful. And I know Jean could relate, and I know you too, Jolene, because remember when we went there and we saw the kauri trees, but Aotearoa for New Zealand, and I'm just sharing because our brothers and sisters couldn't get on, but I think we were expecting to hear something about how they're healing. So Aotearoa means the big white cloud hanging over the island. Like this big, and that was their name, but their C word is for cook. Cook came in 1840 along all of New Zealand, Aotearoa, Australia, Hawaii, and all of the islands. And when they come, they take away how you pray and they rename all your places. And they name your places after whoever's with them or whatever happens, And so Aotearoa was victimized by these oppressors since 1850. So if you look at that, our 1850, 1840, it's a short period of time in which 150 years where their land was taken, their children were taken. They had in Australia the stolen generation. But since it's Indigenous Week, let me tell you about the resiliencies that I found when I first visited in 2004. And I stayed with Deidre Nahula, and she was married to Sid Jackson. And they were they're called the activists. And they were the ones who took over Auckland. They took over Auckland Island, like how we took over, there's all these analogies, how we took over Alcatraz. And when they took over Auckland, they occupied for a year and a half. And this is the stories that they told me when I arrived there. And they put a big war waka that could hold 300 plus warriors, a big waka right there on Auckland, and they occupied it. And they tried, and their occupation was to talk about the same things that we did with Alcatraz, to look at our sovereignty, our treaties. And so when I arrived there, and they picked me up from the airport, they, I just thought, how we're Indians, we're just meeting some other people, and they're feeding us, and they're cruising us in their car and everything. And so when they took me out there, they started talking about when they occupied Auckland. And I was just so overwhelmed with their tenacity, with their Indigenous thriving. And I just couldn't figure out how they got that big waka, that war canoe, there, and it stays there. You can see it. But this the story I wanted to share with you, and thank you, Jolene. We're always ready. Native Wellness Institute, we're a team, and we're always ready to share stories. And me and Jean, we could tell a few stories. So I got to spend a whole week in 2004 with Kakuni Blasdale, who is from Hawaii. And Kakuni was there because they were going to build a healing center. And this healing center's focus, Jolene, was to heal from lateral oppression, was to heal from at that time, 70% of their men were locked up in prison at that time. And it hasn't changed much in 2020. So Kakuni, I wanted to share the story. A cyclone came in, so we couldn't go out to the upper island where we were going to build the healing center. And so they went to work because they had jobs. And I left Kakuni, this elder, he was 80 years old then. They left us together in the house, and she just had rooms that were circles of books. It's with pillows. This is like, how they would just go in there and lay on the pillows and grab a book and read and discuss. So him and I got to sit, at least 4 or 5 hours each day among the books. But I recognized, and I was just, at 2004, I was like middle-aged, where I would say I didn't know nothing. I was smart, but I didn't know nothing. And kind of in Indigenous knowledge, we were smart. So I knew that I had to just shut up and listen. And so I cooked for him. Of course, I cooked for him. And he just ate simple, just like an egg and toast. He just ate simple. And he liked papaya. He liked mango. He liked fruit. And he liked really good, like English tea. And so I would cook for him. So this is the story that he told me. He said it was, a few thousand years ago that on Hawaii, there was 12 large wakas, the war canoes that could hold hundreds. And they were sent out. And the reason he knows this story is because he taught at the medical school. He was a medical doctor, an MD. But his hobby, kind of like us, like, how like Native Wellness, we all have these hobbies. They're like history, like we're always like, studying. That's our synergy when we're studying history. His hobby, and this is what he called it, is he studied the chants or the songs. Mm-hmm. And that's how he had traced this story, that these few thousand years ago, these 12 wakas were sent out to explore, and they were supposed to come back to just like how we sent out people in a lot of our tribes. We sent them out, and they were supposed to come back to tell us what they found. So 9 of the wakas landed on Aotearoa, and that was the establishment of the Maori from Hawaii. That's why Jolene and Jean, remember when we went up to the North Island and we had that ceremony at dawn, and they showed us where when their ancestors died, when their physical body died, they were still alive, that they went from the North Island back to Hawaii. And so he said 9. And so I'm remembering, our resiliency, most of us in our tribes, is you have to remember the story without notes or PowerPoints. So 9 of those wakas landed on Aotearoa, and so the culture transformed from that point. And and I would, when we do invite some of our Maori people on, one of the other wakas landed on Tahiti. Another waka landed on Easter Island. And this is why it's important for Native wellness today. This is good we're having this Indigenous dialogue. They believe the other waka got shifted and landed on the West Coast, up near Alaska. That's why they have Ta Moko. That's why, this is what the women put on. This is what the men put on. That's why they had, and some of their songs and their chants are similar. And that's what he said along the coast. So all of our canoe families, and, they have their stories. We need to hear their Indigenous stories. And he said, and that's why we're connected. 2 continents, because those chants are all prayers to the ancestors. And when we sing those songs, and when we go on the canoe journey, and when we eat salmon, when we go hunt, all of the things that we do, if we trace it back, the Indigenous knowledge and the Indigenous history comes from Hawaii. And so when I was, when you asked, I'm dressed like this. I've been in line for 2 hours to get tested for COVID. This is my 5th test. And I'm pretty sure, I'm, pretty healthy. But you don't know if you're asymptomatic or whatever. But whenever they have testing, I go. So I've been in line. And when you asked, I thought I should at least say that history. And then, and I don't want to like hog the time, but the other story that he told, and I just like to share it here, and it's to honor our Maori relatives, is that tree, that the kori tree, and I might be saying it with my Blackfeet accent, that they look like redwood trees that they make the waka out of. The story that he shared was that when the whales used to kind of swim by, and migrate past Aotearoa, because of that big white cloud, they couldn't see the island, and some of the whales would beach on the island and die. And so this was back in the time when it's like in our tribes all had people that could shapeshift. And so when they would see their relative, their grandma whale and their grandpa whale, or their papa whale, their mama whale die, they had a whale meeting, like a whale congregation, kind of like we do for this week. We're congregating and we're hearing stories, and the whales decided that the warrior whales would sacrifice themselves, and that they would go up on the island and they would become the kori trees. And they would grow so tall that they would grow above the cloud. And so when the whales were coming, they would be able to see them, and they would go around and they wouldn't get beached on the island. And that's why the trees, that's why whales don't have scales. And that's why when you look at the kori tree, it's just like the scales. And so that is, I'm not Maori, but I just want to respect, because the way that we heal from lateral oppression is we tell each other's truths. And so I just wanted to share that much, Shalene.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Theta. I remember going up to that cliff where those kori trees were dying. And I remember them telling, when those trees were dying, the whales would come into that bay, and it was like they were crying, like for their ancestors that were dying. I remember that story so well.
What I just want to say is, like, it's really interesting, Theta, because when I first went to Aotearoa, it was in 96 or something. And I was young and I knew nothing. I thought I knew something, but I knew a lot of nothing, but to hear you telling those stories and sharing those stories of your experience there, those are the same stories I heard from them. The same things about the trees, the trees, the trees that they're huge trees, and they like the roots they were like upside down trees, and those upside down trees, and and what was really kind of cool when I was there, talk about Indigenous Peoples Day. When I was there, it was sponsored by the university, so I was there with other Alaska Natives, and Tuti was our guide, Tuti and John, but Tuti was an elder, and I'm sitting in the front with them in the van, and the rest of the group is sitting in the back, and she asked me the question. She goes, "Gene, let me ask you, do you think that your group we have this whole agenda that was put together by the university. We can go by that agenda, or do you want to do Maori?" And I said, "I can speak on behalf of this group. We will do Maori." And then she immediately said, "John, turn around. This is what we're going to do." And John looked, he was Maori as well. John looked at her and said, "We have a schedule." It says, "But we're doing Maori. So let's go." And so from that point on, we threw the itinerary of the university out the window. Literally, she just tossed it out the window and said, "We're doing Maori." And for 2 weeks, about 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, that's what we did. And so it was just a memorable trip. I will never forget it.
We have so many awesome memories from there. I kind of want to shift gears a little bit and some of the reflections from yesterday, Indigenous Peoples Day. So I live outside of Portland, Oregon, and last week there was a flyer circulating calling people to, well, it was a national call to action. And there was a flyer that I saw that said Indigenous Peoples Day of Rage. And they were inviting people to come and not to bring children because it wasn't going to be a family-friendly event, that there would be violence and all of that. So there was violence. This was on Sunday night, so the night before Columbus Day. There was violence. There was, a gunshot fired, buildings vandalized and tried to be burned, statues taken down, Lincoln, and anyway, the Indigenous community got the blame for that, even though it wasn't just the Indigenous community. So there's all this strife like happening here. So my day yesterday started like with phone calls at 6:45 a.m. and then helping people process until like midnight last night, and so some people were happy that happened and they were out there celebrating. Some people were angry that happened because of the years that they have spent building relationships, and now that went down the tube or somewhat, and then helping women process through that were triggered because of the violence. And so that was like the major thing that was happening. Theta knows I reached out Sunday night to Theta and several others because women that were like triggered, like their childhood trauma, their trauma around being in domestic violence relationships was triggered from the violence that they saw on the TV or the violence that they saw from the news or from other people. So anyway, I've been just reflecting a lot about it. And one of the things that reminded me of was years ago, about 7 years ago, during our first veterans gathering that NWI did, John Trudell was one of our speakers. John Trudell was in the Army. Like I learned that, I didn't realize that. John Trudell was in the Army and he came and he spoke as a former veteran of the US Army, and he came to speak as a former veteran of the American Indian movement. And so it was just like really awesome. And so he stayed the whole week. It was an encampment. And so I was visiting with him one time. There were several of us, and I asked him, about AIM, his involvement with AIM, and if he had any regrets. And without hesitation, he said, yes, I do. He said, I wish we would have, well, first he gave this whole history of AIM, right? That it was really an elder initiative, right? It was the elders that were starting it and saying that we need to start this movement based on traditional values, right? Which included being nonviolent. And he said, I wish we would have started out with Native and cultural humility instead of starting out with Native pride. And then he went on to explain like what he meant by that, right? Where the Native pride, a lot of Native men in particular that were getting involved with that movement, use that pride to put themselves above other people and to put down, right? So like behaving in this violent way. And so anyway, so we saw violence happening that preceded the Indigenous Peoples Day celebration. And for some people that clouded their celebration yesterday. So I just kind of wanted to ask both of you your thoughts about that.
Well, Jean, well, John Trudell, I grew up with him, he was in the Bay Area, and John was just he metamorphosized and transformed. And I'm glad that he came to that gathering as a veteran, because one of his, Wilma Mankiller used to take care of him. Like, he was real young. And so Wilma worked for my mother. And then, so that's when I first met John. And so it's good that one of his transformations that I seen was when his wife and children were murdered, they were burned. And that grief, what he did and its resiliency with that grief is he came out of that grief through creation, singing, poetry, and speaking, like when he spoke to you. So I'll say this. So we had Bill Wapipa from the American Indian Movement. I grew up with him in Oakland. He had the AIM house. And I grew up with Dennis Banks, who is my mom's best friend when he was alive. I grew up with Floyd Westerman, who was also part of AIM. But they talked about a lot of, and it's just to know the correct history is a lot of them with Clyde Belcourt. When they started, they were just trying to stop how the police were treating natives in Minneapolis. That was, and then it kind of branched off, it branched off to different, things in Oakland, things so then I think that we have to look at the AIM, like the AIM song is a holy song. It's a prayer song. And the AIM song, when they're singing it, and I know Jean could bust it out. I don't have the singing voice, but when they're singing it, I always get tears, because what the truth passes through 3 phases, and this is what I heard from all those AIMsters. John was just one of them. Is they said the truth passes through 3 phases. 1, it's ridiculed. They'll ridicule you, they'll make fun of you. And you see that kind of in our election process now. Okay. And then the second phase is that it's violently opposed. And so it's, and then the third phase is it's self-evident. Then everybody knows the truth. So I was thinking about that, because I don't believe in any form of violence, even with words, even with thoughts. Like our discipline is to not even let your thoughts be violent, to think violent of someone, because it hurts you. It comes back on you. So I've been really trying to pray, and and you pray for your enemies, and I'm praying for, but you can pray for the truth. And so like right now, I guess, you know, I want to give Jean some time. I think when you're a warrior and you're a true warrior for your sovereignty and for your children and your grandchildren and your ways and your language, that sometimes you got to put your life on the line.
Mhm.
You got to die for your people. So I don't reprimand anyone who is putting their life on the line for the truth. I can't, because they're warriors. But you know, thank you for bringing this up, Jolene, because what we have to do is we have to let the truth be known and not what the media construes it to.
Mhm.
And we have to stop hurting our brown, you know, anyone darker than a paper bag. They're not telling the truth about us. So we, warriors of the social media, must tell the truth.
Mhm.
And so that's just some of my reflection. But we have to pay attention. You know, I was listening to NPR. I was listening to the Supreme Court and all of the good thinkers dialoguing. Man, I felt like I went to law school for while I was waiting in line for 2 hours. I was listening, and because I'm educate yourself and then get into action.
Mhm.
That's what Dennis Banks told me. He said, educate yourself and get into action. So I'm going to give it to Jean. You know, Jean, what you thinking? Because there's so much going on.
You know, I just, you know, I saw this here text on here from our sister Doris, and she talked about Abner Johnson, about telling stories about early on in creation stories and movement and stuff. But it's interesting how related we are, because I was just talking to Abner has since passed on, but I was talking to Abner's brother this morning, who is an elder. And we go out and have pancakes, and because he likes to have pancakes. And so I was just talking about what we're going to go have pancakes so later on. But it's interesting how we're connected. You know, you mentioned John and what was going on, Trudell, and I had the honor and pleasure of meeting him. And last time we were over in I think it's Grand Ron, and he started his talk off as it's going. Now, just before I speak, I just want to let all of you know I'm crazy. You know, and he goes, no, I've been diagnosed as crazy. You know, and so he started talking. And then at the end, he said, anybody have any questions? And I asked him, hey, John, so everything that you said made sense to me. Everything made sense, you know, and so you said you were crazy. So what's that have to say about me? And he said, I love this line. He goes, we're recruiting.
I remember that.
Yeah. You know, and I love that. But anyways, I had a conversation, you know, through the years, I had time to sit with him because I'd run into him and play music, or he'd read his poetry and I'd back him up with music. But one thing that stuck out for me is that he said that that our battle it's a spiritual battle. It's a cultural battle. And like you said, humility, because when we first started, you know, sure, we started with physical and violence in this way. But the thing is that colonized Western culture, they are better at it than us because they've been doing it longer. They've been doing it longer, and they have more resources and they have more people than we do. And our strength is our spirituality and our culture and our connection to this land. And that's where our strength is, because they don't know that. They don't know that. They have lost their way. They've lost their spirituality. They've lost their connection to the land, and they've lost their connection to ancestors. And we still have that. And if we try to start it with force and be violent in that way, you know, they will always win because they have the experience at it. They've been doing it. And they said, look at this country, look at this land, how it's all about violence. It's all about force. And so it's like, so how we're going to win this is through spirit and love. Love for our people, love for this land that we are on. You know, and you know, I like Tita said, there's warriors, yes, stand up, and when you said that about giving your life for your people, and I can say that, with NWI, we would step up. I mean, and we love our people. We
Yes.
love our people, and so that's one thing that really sticks out for me. But having that conversation with John, and especially towards the end of his walk on this earth,
Yeah.
he's really talking about that love and our spirituality and who we are as Indigenous people.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you both. And what it made me think of is, well, I was really impacted by the women that reached out and how many reached out. I'm talking to a 17-year-old this evening because we didn't have time last night. People that are seeing this happening, and they have questions, and they're just wondering, and they've been taught that love and peace is the way, and then they saw this violence over here, and 30 some people were arrested, and that's another impact, that our people end up in that system, right? But what it reminded me of is my conversation in the Power Hour I did with Sydney Stone Brown, who wrote the book on Native self-actualization, right? And I remember her story about when the stories that her elders told her about when Maslow, in his hierarchy of needs, when he came and lived amongst, her people, include Thetis people as well, and how he was so just blown away when he went there, like, oh my gosh, these people are already self-actualized, and that's where he got his hierarchy of needs, right? And then when he went to the trading post with the elders, and the trading post owners were following them around the store, because they assumed that they were going to steal, right? And then Maslow was just so mad and asking the elders, aren't you mad? Like, how come you didn't say anything? Why did you let them treat you like that? And the elders laughed. Because they said, we know that those people aren't whole. They don't even see themselves as a part of humanity. So we pity them. And we pray for them so that they can be whole and see themselves as a part of humanity. And, that's such a beautiful response to racism, and it also reminds me the story of the time we met the Dalai Lama, and he gets off this conference call because the Chinese people were trying to kill his people. And then he comes and he still just exudes love, no bit of anger. You could feel him before he entered the room, and you could just feel that love. I think there's lessons there for us to learn, right? Because we know that violence doesn't end well for our people, right? And it's because of the systems that are in place that are still based in that supremacy, right? So it's violence doesn't end well. But I think that comes with maturity, right? But it also comes with who our mentors and guides and supports are, right? Where we can take that rage, that rage is understandable. Some of us have 500 plus years of rage, but how can we take that rage and bring it down to anger, and then take that anger and then channel it into something that's positive, productive, and proactive, right? Instead of channeling it into something that gets our people put in jail and all of that other kind of stuff. So what are your thoughts?
Well, in hindsight, when you have that anger, you want to go out and defend your grandma, and defend your missing and murdered Indigenous women, and defend your LGBTQ, and defend. When you have that anger, this is what you should do. You should go out in the mountains and fast for 4 days. And take that anger and don't drink water or food, and talk to Creator and ask Creator what you should do. And, you know, and let them sweat you, or, and I'm just saying, you know, that's a recommendation. Every tribe does it different. Because sometimes maybe you need to just go out and sit in the woods and listen to the birds and harvest some sage or get some cedar if you have that urge, because it's natural. Don't beat yourself up.
Mm-hmm.
If you because what I see in my mental health work is people that stuff their rage, it comes out in their body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It comes out, you know, in stroke or diabetes or just something else. And so I would really say, you know, really to take it and do some kind of ceremony in it's in steps, and go move through the anger. And then you know, it's like, take your anger, like I learned, because I grew up with a lot of rage because of the trauma that I inherited, and then that was in my family. So I learned to and you know, I was like young, you know, like 10th grade, I would just go run 5 miles. And then my rage was kind of okay. It would damper down. Or I would do something physical.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would like right now, you know what I've been doing? I just been taking pictures and I've been posting them. You know, I'm like, I take my rage and I just say, okay, how can I say this constructive? You know, and then I post the pictures. So that's some of my thoughts, is channel it, feel the feelings, but channel it, you know. And it's almost like I used to take that rage and write them a proposal and win some money. I mean, you know, right? Get a constructive plan together. Go hike Chief Mountain. You know, put a prayer up on top of Chief Mountain. You know, something like that. So, and I know Gene. I want to give Gene some time. What do you think of Gene? How do you with her?
I mean, I just gotta build on that, Theta. It's just that I really agree with you that, you know, ceremony, getting outside, cleanse, find that way to heal. But you know, I go to the city in Seattle, and when I'm in Seattle, there, I tell you what, it's like, I know we're coming down with time here. It's like, but when I was walking through Seattle last time, I was just looking around, going, man, this is no place for Indians. This is no place for Indians. You know, and I could feel the energy and everything, you know, and that, you know, and so even if you're in the city, you have to, like, you know, we always talk about ceremony, but we got to create our own ceremony, you know, and create those ceremonies wherever you're at. Because I ride a bike, and my bike rides, it's my ceremony. This is a way right here. Get rid of some of my frustrations right here, and it's that creative energy. It's all an energy. You know, and what's your, just go sit. You can always find a tree in a city, and the trees hold the remembering. You know, just that's a relative, that's an ancestor. Those trees. You know, see, so we're in the cities. We just gotta to create our own ceremonies within the confines of that city. You know, I'll tell you what, it's easier outside the cities. It just is. It just is. You know.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you both. Thank you both. I think, you know, that's another reason why we even have the power hours. And before you guys got on, I was telling people, you know, if you're running out of things to watch on Netflix or whatever, binge out on Native Wellness Institute YouTube channel, and just, you can watch 181 power hours now.
Hey, Julie, real quick, before we leave here. You're saying that the women were being triggered by all this too, you know, and oh man, as a male, our women, love our women, you know, thank you. Men, you got to get involved, got to step up, brothers, we got to get there, we got to heal. Men, we've got to heal, you know, and step outside of our box, you know.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, thank you, because I was talking to one of the women earlier this morning, and just helping her process and make sense of it, because she said, you know, thank you for sharing these things, because I I haven't wanted to say this out loud. She goes, but I'm tired of this male violent energy that I feel in places. And she goes, I don't want to go anywhere where there's a penis. Like that's what she told me this morning, right? And that was like, she didn't even realize that she was being triggered by the violence that was happening, right? So just, you know, just things to think about. I think there was some good suggestions and solutions here today, and that's what we offer. That's what we're about. That's what these power hours are about, right? Is focusing on the solutions, not just complaining about things, but really focusing on the solutions. So we're a few minutes over, and that's okay. Just to recap, today we were just filling in because our relatives from New Zealand had technical difficulties. They weren't able to get on. I texted everybody, hey, you want to join me? So here we are having this conversation. This is our 30th week of our power hours. We started out 7 days a week. We moved to 5 days a week. Now we are in our 181st power hour today. All of the power hours are on the Native Wellness Institute's YouTube channel. They're also on our Facebook page if you want to scroll back and look at them. But every day at the same place, same time, we try to be that anchor. This is our contribution to the pandemic. We thank you all for being here. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Theta, for jumping on at the last minute. Tomorrow, we have a special treat. Theta will be back with our other founding board member, Cecilia Fire Thunder. Cecilia Fire Thunder was the first female elected president of the Oglala Lakota Nation. Her and Theta tomorrow are going to be talking about what have they learned in this wellness movement, and how can that help us with pandemic fatigue. Like a lot of us are experiencing pandemic fatigue. So that's what we'll talk about tomorrow. And then we have, because we're celebrating Indigenous Peoples Week, on Thursday, we'll have our brothers and sisters from Australia that are coming on, and they're gonna share the power hour. And then on Friday, we have our Canadian relatives. They're gonna come on and do a power hour for us on Friday. So thank you for being here today. Please tune in for the rest of the week. And we don't know how long we're doing the power hours. We just keep going. So we'll continue to do that as long as we can. So thank you, everyone.
2087, eh?
Yeah. Yeah, right. So have an awesome week. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day and week and month and year and century. And we'll see you all tomorrow.
Hi, hoi.